On silent, please. Okay, Mr. Menick, just pass yourself.
Thank you, Convener. Welcome to this meeting of Dundee City Council, which is being held in a hybrid format in terms of Section 43 of the Local Governance in Scotland Act 2003. All members in attendance are able to fully participate in the meeting, which is being live streamed. By participating in the meeting, you are consenting to being filmed and recorded. Should any member need to leave the meeting for any reason, can they please use the... If a member loses their connection, they should make every effort to rejoin the meeting, but if this is not possible, the Committee Services Officer will note their absence for the remainder of the meeting. If you have to leave the meeting due to a declaration of interest, you must remain out of the meeting until invited back in. Would all members please mute their microphones when not speaking to avoid background noise and turn off any smart speakers? If you are to be the next speaker, please allow a pause after the last speaker has muted their microphone. Please then press the right-hand button on your console to activate your microphone. If you are joining the meeting remotely, please start the meeting with your camera on. Your face will appear on the screen when you are speaking. If your connection is poor, you may wish to turn off your camera to see if this improves matters. If this doesn't help, you may wish to quickly leave the meeting and rejoin. If you wish to raise a point of order, ask a question, speak on any item, or move a motion or amendment, please use the chat when the relevant item is called. The convener will then invite you to speak. Please do not use the hands up function or intervene in any other way. And would members of the press and public please not post messages in the chat. Where items are for noting, or where there has been no disagreement expressed, the convener will call for any member who has a contrary view to indicate this through the chat, otherwise the item will be agreed. Please would members not, as those joining the meeting by telephone cannot see the chat and therefore will not be able to follow the debate. Although we are operating in a different way, this is still a formal meeting of the committee, and the required standards of behaviour and discussion are the same as in a face-to-face meeting. Standing orders apply to the proceedings, and the provisions of the Councillors' Code of Conduct also apply in the usual way. Does any member have any queries regarding these procedures? There are no queries, Convener, so I'll now ask the Committee Services Officer to take a roll call for the minute. Thank you.
Thanks, Roger. Convener.
I'm here.
Councillor Anderson.
I'm here.
Councillor Black.
Present.
Lord Provost.
Present.
Deputy Lord Provost.
Present.
Bailey Dawson.
I'm here.
I've had apologies from Councillor Elnackley. Councillor Flynn.
Good evening, I'm here.
Councillor Lynn.
Present.
Councillor Mills.
Present.
Bailey Roberts.
Good evening, I'm here.
Councillor Rome.
Good evening, present.
Bailey Sawers.
Yes, I'm here.
Councillor Short. Councillor Smith.
Good evening, I'm here.
Councillor Toland.
I am here.
Bailey Keenan.
Present.
I've had apologies from Councillor Cruikshank and Councillor Finnegan. Councillor McHugh.
Present.
Present.
Sorry. Right, I'll mark her as present. Councillor Shears.
Evening, I'm here.
I've had apologies from Bailey Wright, and I've also had apologies from Bailey McPherson. Councillor Coleman.
Good evening, I'm here.
Here.
Councillor Duncan.
Here.
Bailey Scott.
Here.
Mrs McVean.
Good evening, I'm here.
Mrs Little.
Good evening, present.
I've had apologies from Mr Gibson. Ms Barclay.
Evening, I'm here.
Mrs Javid. Mr Anderson McGuinness. And Miss Day.
Present.
That concludes the roll call, thanks.
Okay, thank you for that. And I think that we are having some issues with the sound in here tonight, so apologies for anybody online who's struggling to hear. And if there's any issues, just notify the chat and we'll try and get that resolved. With that, Arlene, can we move to the first item of business, please?
Item 1, declaration of interest. Are there any declarations?
Not seeing any indications.
That takes us on to item 2, review of the service estate. You're asked to agree the recommendations.
Okay, and first one I can see is Councillor Duncan, you have a question.
Thanks, Convener. I'll be brief because of the sound problems, and if the information is not available tonight, I'm happy to wait for it to be circulated. But I'm glad to see that there's going to be improvement works carried out to both Barn Hill Primary and also Craigie Barnes Primary, both of which are currently rated Category C. And I'm just curious to know what actions would be required to bring them up to Category A, and what might the timescales be?
Okay, I think Mrs. May, you want to answer in the first instance. Other information, we can pass that on to all members afterwards, but I'll pass yourself.
Thank you, Convener, and thank you for the question. It is the kind of detailed information we could probably provide a better version of after the committee. We'll share that. Thank you.
So we'll make sure that's shared with all elected members after committee. Councillor Duncan, if you're happy with that.
That's quite acceptable. Thank you.
Okay. Councillor Shears, you're next.
Thanks, Convener. It's just the one question now because I was going to ask the same as Councillor Duncan there. Just having a look at the Grove Academy occupancy, it's running dangerously close to 100%. Are we forecasting that going over 100% and coming in to next year when the leavers leave and the primary schools in the catchment area come in? And if we are, what kind of impact is that going to have on the student experiences? And are there any mitigations in place should it go over occupancy? Thank you.
Okay, Mr. Fleming, I'll bring you in.
Thank you, Convener, and thank you, Councillor Shears, for the question. We're anticipating this will be broadly in line with where it is at the moment, kind of almost at capacity. We're not foreseeing any issues, but we will bring a further report to committee around some of the work we will do around keeping requests for priority 1 pupils, so that catchment pupils have the opportunity to get into their catchment school, and how we manage areas that are almost at full capacity. So we'll have a further report around reserving some of those spaces for pupils that live in the area.
With that, okay. Next question I have is from Bailey Scott.
My question was the same as already been asked about the 2 Broadie schools that are Category C for overall condition, but I'd make the point that from August, Craigie Barnes will also be in the catchment area. 3 out of the 4 primary schools that are linked with Grove Academy will all be Category C, so I would welcome some investment in those schools to the figures that you're going to circulate after the meeting.
Yeah, we'll make sure that that's all covered for all elected members after the meeting. Okay, Councillor Scullen.
Hi, I've just got a question on school capacity as well. In 6.4, it says that the schools that are over capacity are using the flexibility within their accommodation, which enables them to respond appropriately. But Rosebank always seems to be over capacity. So how can they possibly be coping with that constant demand with the space that they have that's not affecting the teaching and the kids?
Okay, pass again to Mr. Fleming to answer that.
Thank you, Convener. Thank you, Councillor Scone, for the question. Really important. We keep a very close eye and work closely, of course, with other services around school capacities. What we have here is a system that measures the classroom, stereotypical classroom space, but a number of schools, particularly our newer buildings, have lots of flexible spaces within the building, and in particular where there's a shared campus, there's classrooms and space that can be used across both campuses. So notwithstanding that, we do keep a close eye in the close-knit area that are over capacity and have measures in place, such as reserving spaces for catchment area pupils to bring those down in the coming years as well.
Okay, you happy with that response, Councillor Scullen?
Yeah, that's fine.
Okay. I don't see, oh, sorry, Councillor Flynn, you just sneaked in there just as I was about to finish it.
Sorry about that, Convener. Thanks very much. Just to sort of say to officers, I appreciate the report itself. It actually gives some detail of how well the estate has been maintained and the level of the estate standard, whether it be condition or suitability. And I think it's really important to see what we're doing within the city to make sure we've got a good education establishment for our young people within the city, not just the fact that we've got 3.5 million spent in last year or this current year, but we're proposing to spend another 2.1 million and make sure we keep the standards up. And again, we look at Braveview and Craigie, who are probably the lowest rating of the high schools, but we're, as you see, we're putting in a new East End community campus at over 100 million being invested for the benefit of our young people in the city. So I welcome the report and what's contained within it, and I'm sure we'll maintain these levels going forward. Thank you.
No, thank you for your comment, Councillor Flynn. And I think it is something that isn't reflected often through these reports, is the amount of money we spend every year just to make sure our schools are maintaining the standard of condition throughout the year. And there has been a significant investment down the years just making sure that the current school buildings do maintain that standard. So that's really important. Councillor Anderson, I think I'll give you the last comment, and then after that we'll move on.
Thank you, an excellent report. It was just to pick up a point that we discussed earlier with officers. I think it's quite important we now get an update on the energy efficiency of the school estate, given the contribution the school estate is making towards our emissions. And it was just to confirm with Mrs May that I've actually requested that to be done.
Yeah, Mrs May, do you want to respond to that?
Yes, thank you. And as Councillor Anderson has said, we've had a conversation around that and linked in with our colleagues in City Development who would provide us with that detail to enhance this report even further. So we would like to give that commitment to say that we will include the energy levels of our schools going forward.
Okay. With that, I don't see anybody else wishing to comment. Can this report be agreed? Okay. Okay, Arlene.
Item 3, Scottish Attainment Challenge update, and this is for noting.
Okay, Councillor Coleman, you were first then, so pass over to yourself.
Thank you, Mr Convener. The reduction of the Attainment Challenge funding is total, and its total loss at the end of 25-26 is both a real concern, and I think it is self-evident that taking out this level of significant investment, which stood at over 6 million a year back in 21-22, will have a negative impact. At 4.8 of the report, it indicates that the staffing loss will be managed through redeployment, retirements and ending temporary contracts, which I think we'll all agree is all very regrettable. But the question is, how many posts in each category, please, and what is the time frame for these actions to take place?
Okay, well, Mrs May, if you have, or Mr Flem, if you have that information.
Thank you, Convener. Thank you for the question, Councillor Coleman. I'm happy to provide further detailed numbers from staff. What we would emphasise is, again, that these staff are continuing in different ways, particularly around our mainstream work, around our pedagogy team as well. So just, if you like, removing in terms of access from this fund, but moving into our mainstreaming of some of our work as planned. Happy to provide further details around the numbers that you talk about, just being sensitive to the individuals involved in employment in these posts. And what I can say is that all changes will be made at the end of this academic session. As we move into the new academic session, all these changes will be in place. Thank you.
Yes, we'll make sure that information is sent out to elected members after committee. Are you happy with that, Councillor Coleman?
Yes, thank you very much.
Okay, Bailey Keenan, I see you've got a comment.
Yeah, Convener, I wonder if you would consider writing to the Cabinet Secretary and asking for additional funds for education to hopefully prevent making this level of cuts. You know, I look at some of the cuts and see that, you know, there's potential for psychology being part of that. Whilst in the town, a lot of kids are needing a psychologist to have a review of their mental health. And I'm really concerned that we have individuals in most need at a time we make this level of cut. The other reason for us, and that you consider writing to the Minister, is that later in the financial papers, it mentions that that we are overspent in education by way of teaching because of the lack of numbers that we got in relation to new qualified teachers. So they're coming in at the bottom end of the scale, and we've had to employ people on a much higher rate. So, you know, at the same time as this budget's been cut year on year, the Scottish Government's taking the money and giving it to somewhere else. And in somewhere else in Scotland, we've managed to go down 600 teachers. So it really seems like Dundee's suffering at the extent of the money that's getting taken away from them. So I'd like your comment on that, and I've got a further comment to make.
Okay, so I think there's a couple of things based on what you said, Billy Keenan. I mean, again, it's just a reminder that the only local authority that opposed the decision on the Scottish Attainment Challenge was Dundee City Council, and by my former colleague, John Alexander. But I do recollect that we've been here before, Billy Keenan, and on previous occasions I have written at the request of this committee to the CABSEC on this very subject, and I've received a response which, if I recall, was shared with elected members, and also have had conversations, as had other colleagues, Councillor Flynn, with CABSEC and colleagues in government on this subject. So it's something we've done before, and I'm no issue with speaking to the CABSEC again. I suspect we will get the same answer that we got on previous occasions. So this is something we've done before, and we're never shy from contacting our colleagues in government on behalf of the City of Dundee. But I see you want to come back in, so I'll let you back in.
Well, I'm pleased that you're going to take it on board and write to the Cabinet Secretary, because I actually believe that the Scottish Government have got a much better financial settlement this year than we're seeing filtering through by way of officers' reports. If I could just raise another thing in relation to this report, given that it's so close to the budget, and I probably said the same last year as well, it seems a bit deceitful that we would have it here and not part of the overall budget consultation. Everything else in the budget's about cutting school crossing patrollers or cutting swimming pools. So there's mention to cuts within education, but certainly no this one. And as I said, I think that we're looking at individual children that should have protected characteristics that we should be taking into account, that when we're making this level of cuts, that we're catering for them. And I'm not sure we're doing that. So, I mean, I think it's deceitful that we've got this forward. We could be more open as a council, more transparent. People will just not understand why they're seeing £1.3 billion worth of cuts coming just before a budget gets set in any department of council. And we've had this one now, and we had Care Park a few weeks ago. It's no fair.
Well, I think there's another part to that. I'm sure Mr. Many in his job wouldn't be doing it properly if he wasn't advising us on how we should be consulting on a variety of subjects. And if we felt there was a need to do this, then that's certainly something that we would have been doing. But this is something that's been happening now for a number of years, this saving, because of the Scottish Attainment Challenge funding. And again, it would have been helpful if your colleagues nationally would have been a bit more supportive in COSLA than in support of Councillor Alexander as it was then when this came forward. And also would be helpful, you know, looking at a budget savings if we weren't having to look at issues such as national insurance contributions, because the UK government are not fully supporting the Scottish government and not fully supporting the local authorities or in Scotland in giving us the money that they're taking away from the national insurance. So I think that would be something that would be helpful as well. I don't know if there's anything that any officers need to add at this stage about what we're doing, or are we comfortable with what's been said? Mr. Fleming or Mrs. May?
The only thing I would add, Convener, is that the Scottish Attainment Challenge Fund is a grant that we receive. We're not cutting it, but I understand the point I think that's been made. But it's a grant given to us by the Scottish Government. So it just reduced year on year.
I'll give you one last chance.
Yeah, again, Convener, this is about being open to the public and being as clear as we possibly can. You know, it's okay saying, you know, it's a grant. It still comes as a cut to education within the city. And at the same time, last year, we didn't get the NQTs that we would have expected. So we've taken a double done when this money gets taken off as well. You know, the government we could make another case to government for how they should be funding a bit more in education in Dundee, so as these cuts aren't having to be made. But I could go on and ask the question of Mr. Menny, so he feels there's any protected characteristics of individuals that would be affected by it. I believe that there is, and I would say that the only reason that we brought consultation forward is you've been chased by that for the Scottish Office or the auditors to say you need to be more transparent in Audit Scotland and the Accounts Commission, so you need to be more transparent in what you do and what you set out in front of the public. I don't think Council is doing that.
I think your comments have been noted. Councillor Flynn, do you wish to come in?
Yeah, thanks, Convener. Just to follow on from what you've said, which is absolutely accurate to the level where I think everyone agreed. I just want to clarify what Bailey Keenan said about the budget. There's been no decisions made on the budget yet, as he's well aware. So I'd rather that he didn't scaremonger. I think it's important that we take on board the officers' proposals, not the council administration's proposals at this stage, and the budget will be here in the next month, and we'll all have an opportunity to put our own budgets forward. And again, as you touched upon, I think the challenges with budgets, when you see something like the employer's national insurance coming through and putting on top of the challenges from what's been presented, I think that just, £6 million, I think it was mentioned in a previous committee. I think that puts pressure on anyone trying to make a budget proposal for the committee to approve or not. Thank you.
No, thank you for those comments, Councillor Flynn. I don't see anybody else wishing to come in, so this report can be agreed. Okay. Okay, Arlene.
Thanks. At this point, external members of the committee will leave. Okay, so that takes us on to item 4, Dundee Humanitarian Partnership Ukraine Resettlement. This is for noting.
Okay. I'm not seeing any questions. So I'll give Louise a chance to sit down before we then move. But Councillor Anderson, thank you. I'll bring you in.
It's just a comment. It was just really to congratulate the staff, because this is a phenomenal piece of work. You know, so the people in the housing department worked absolutely flat out to make sure that people got houses over this period. It was incredibly stressful when we look back, but some real achievements here and amazing work by the communities team and the English for speakers of other languages team. Just a report to be proud of. So just wanted to thank the staff, and particularly Marie Daly, who's sitting up there, to make sure she knows it's appreciated.
Okay, thanks for that. So apologies, I just saw Councillor Flynn's comment, please, and I thought it was from the previous item, so apologies for that. So Councillor Shears, you're in first, sorry.
Yeah, thanks very much. And really, it's just to echo what Councillor Anderson said there. I think we need to look at it in the perspective of the world we're in right now. I mean, we've got Trump getting inaugurated now, reform on the rise. It's a concerning time, and to see a report like this come out from our city is really pleasing, that we're still welcoming city full of empathy for people who have fled the most horrifying circumstances. So congratulations to everyone involved.
No, thank you for those comments, and Councillor Flynn, I'll bring you in now.
Thanks, Convener. Again, I'll just echo what's been said already, but I think it's important to show what a caring city Dundee is when we see so many who are coming from a very, very dangerous and critical situation come to the city and be supported by so many. And I think Councillor Tolan and myself visited the humanitarian team to see what work they were doing some months ago. And I think it's really important that we recognise the efforts that are made by all parts of this council in supporting anyone who comes from these type of circumstances. And I'm sure we'll continue to do that. So thanks very much to everyone involved, and you pass it on, Maria, it'd be fantastic. Thank you.
Well, thank you, Councillor Flynn. I'll just echo the comments of the three of you. The work the officers have done on this is really impressive. And I think the city has done an amazing job to support the Ukrainians that come over Sorry, I'm trying to stop coughing. So I think this is a really important report, and I think, as you said, congratulations to officers for all the work that's going on behind this. With that, I don't see anybody else wishing to come in. So this report be agreed? Okay, and that's Children, Families, Communities for this evening. Thank you.
Okay, welcome to Neighbourhood Regeneration, Housing and Estate Management. Arlene, if you could take us through the agenda, please.
Thanks, Convener. Item 1, declaration of interest. Are there any declarations?
Don't see any, Arlene.
Item 2, sourcing strategy for the procurement of supply and delivery of construction materials. This is for approval.
Thank you. I'm just going to open that up to questions. I am not seeing any, so is this approved? Thank you. Thank you, Arlene.
Item 3, tender received by Head of Housing, Construction and Community Services. This is for approval.
Thank you. I see Councillor Crichton wishing to come in.
Thank you, Convener. Could officers indicate exactly where these urgent roof repairs were needed? I assume this is known as they're all within the current financial year, which has nearly ended.
Okay, thank you, Tony.
Thanks, Convener. Thanks, Councillor Crichton. There's not any specific locations. It's all over and as and when required. Thanks.
Is that okay, Councillor Crichton?
Yeah, I might miss Mr. Boyle off my. Okay.
Okay, Bailey Keenan.
So previously, I was surprised to see roofs up as something that needed urgent repair, given that, you know, conversations that I've had with officers have been about perhaps we've been repairing the wrong thing and we should be looking at window replacements or heating systems or whatever that break down more, for us to be that kind of in-depth look. So, you know, could perhaps officers give a bit of an update on what the direction of travel is? Because, you know, I'd like to know what we're doing to sort of keep the houses in better repair, but other than, you know, or if windows are the one where we need to spend the money and we're spending in the right direction.
Yes, thank you. Tony?
Thanks, Convener. Thanks, Bill. Yeah, in actual fact, we're looking at repairs and upgrades over a whole range of different areas of housing, including window replacement programme you had mentioned. But obviously, we have got ongoing issues with roofs that we need to deal with as part of that. But we're looking at a wide scope of repairs across a whole range of different areas within housing. Thanks.
Okay, with that, Billy, thank you. Well, I see no further questions, so is that approved? Thank you. Thank you, Arlene.
That takes us on item 4, tenders received by Head of Design and Property, and this is also for approval.
Okay, again, I will just open that up to questions. I see no questions, so is that approved? Thank you. Arlene, please.
That takes us on to the confidential part of the agenda. Do you wish to deal with this in the usual way?
Do we wish to deal with this in the usual manner?
Agreed.
Okay, agreed. Thank you. That's the business.
Okay, thanks very much. Over you, Willie, please.
Okay, thank you very much. Firstly, are there any declarations of interest?
See no declarations, so.
Okay, there being no declarations, it then takes you on to item 2, the minute meeting of the Pension Subcommittee and Pension Board, which is submitted for noting.
Yeah, do you have any questions or comments? See any, so okay, that's good. Thank you.
Okay, thanks. That then takes you on to item 3, the multi-agency public protection arrangements, MAPA annual report. You're asked to give the recommendations.
We've got the MAPA report in front of us. I believe the independent chair of the Tayside MAPA SOG is here this evening, Alan Small, and I would like to invite Alan to make some brief comments on the report, please.
Thank you, and thanks for having me here to present this report. I don't intend to go through it in any detail. You'll be pleased to know. I think it kind of speaks for itself, and the covering report that you have probably clarifies everything you would need to know. Just to point out that MAPA is slightly different from other public protection arrangements within the city, in as much as it's managed over the Tayside region. MAPA Tayside SOG being one of 10 MAPA strategic oversight groups in Scotland. And each SOG, which is the abbreviation we use, is required to produce an annual report, which is very carefully choreographed for the Scottish Government. And these annual reports are published on a specific day, and that was actually late November this year that it was published. So, as I say, I don't want to go into any of the detail. That you have the report in front of you. I hope you found it an interesting and informative read and fairly easy to follow, but I'm happy to answer any questions that anybody may have on it.
Thank you very much, Alan. I certainly did find a very interesting read indeed. Mike Bishop and Glennon, have you any additional comments you'd like to make?
Thank you, Convener. Only that I think it's another strong report on MAPA arrangements across Tayside. Alan said that it includes Tayside data focus in there on Dundee, but I think members will appreciate from the case studies that there's a real balance of enforcement, supervision, surveillance and support, depending on the level and type of risk. And obviously, reoffending and non-compliance rates remain low. So I think it's a strong report, which also illustrates continued learning across the partnership as well.
Thanks very much for that, Glenn. And I'll open up to questions. Councillor Coleman, you first, please.
Thank you, Mr. Convener. This is a very helpful and detailed annual report, but a point of clarification, if I may. 5.3 in the committee report, it lists actions for the coming year, but in the same annual report on page 21 of the substantive page numbering, the same actions are listed under what we will do in 24-25. As 24-25 is almost over, can it be clarified if these actions have taken place or they're to be carried over for 25-26?
If I could come in there, Convener.
Yeah, pass over to Alan, please.
Yeah, thanks. So we have a 3-year business plan, and within that, the period of that 3 years, we would hope to complete all of those actions, but the actions are at various points of achievement. So I would expect in next year's report to further comment on the same actions that are covered within that 3-year strategic plan. Our previous plan was kind of impacted by COVID, and we didn't achieve what we set out to achieve. I've got every confidence that we will achieve what we set out to achieve over this 3-year period. Obviously, as long as we don't have another pandemic and lockdown. But I do think we're going in the right direction, and the SOG receives regular updates, as do all the Chief Officers Group of the 3 local authorities on that progress.
Thank you very much. Answer your question, Daniel?
Yes, thank you very much.
Thank you. Bailey Keenan, please.
I just wondering, there seems to be a small number of people that have defaulted on their licensing or their license. And I'm just wondering whether there's any sort of psychological testing to individuals just to make sure that we're maybe in a position of predicting the type of individual that will default. Given that, some of the, I would suggest some of the people in the past that have defaulted have went on to do some serious crimes in Dundee. So perhaps officers could set people's mind at rest that there is robust measures in place.
Alan, would you like to come in and comment on that?
Yeah, I'll come in, but maybe Glenn would like to come in as well on that. But I'll start things off to say that there's a very robust assessment, a risk management assessment carried out on each offender, and it is quite an involved process, and that process continues throughout their management and is reviewed throughout their management. Unfortunately, you can't predict people's behaviour. And yes, we do try and look at warning signs and we try to look at escalation points. But occasionally, people do reoffend or don't comply with the conditions. I would just like to point out, though, that individuals that are managed under MAPA are far less likely to commit further serious sexual offences or further serious offences than other individuals that are managed under different systems. So around about 3% is the recidivism rate, and that's incredibly low for any offender. So I think we can be assured by that, but there is no guarantee, and you're correct. We're dealing with people here, and we're dealing with people who are completely, at times, beset with their own feelings and their own circumstances. And you can't look after them 24 hours, 24/7, 365 days a year, but we do try our very best to manage them to full availability of resources. So I don't know, Glenn, if you want to come in and make any comment on the systems that are used.
Lynn, would you like to follow up?
Thank you, Convener, and thank you, Bailey Keenan, for the questions. Just to confirm then that they're all risk assessed using a minimum of 3 accredited risk assessment tools. And then added to that, depending on the individual and the nature and level of risk, we use further risk assessment tools that might, for instance, include a focus on learning disability or psychopathy or risk of violence, and then also risks in relation to young people as well. So there's a minimum of 3 tools and then specialist tools as and where it's necessary.
That's your question. Okay, thanks very much. And thanks very much for your contribution tonight, Alan. Really appreciated. And I think members have asked to approve the report and agree the recommendations. Nice. See no comments or questions. So we'll take that as agreed. Thank you.
Yeah, thanks, Convener. That takes you on to item 4, capital expenditure monitoring report. This is for noting.
Any questions? I see Councillor Crichton here first, please.
Thank you, Convener. On page 40, the projected outturn for the DCA plant replacement for the financial year nearly finished is 175,000. And the report says the tender is still targeted for this financial year. Can officers just give committee an update on the progress, with obviously this being so close to the end of the financial year?
Oh, sorry. Neil, would you like to answer the question, please?
Thanks, Convener. Thanks for the question, Councillor Crichton. Yeah, work's progress at DC and they're still on programme, and I think what you're seeing there is there'll be a lump sum valuation still required prior to the end of the year, hence why the money's outstanding.
And what's answer your question, Michael?
Yes, thank you, Mr. Martin.
Thank you. Councillor Anderson, please.
Thank you. I've noted in the report that there was a shortfall, in the money for active travel route, but looking at page 37, we basically had 21.5 million in the budget for tackling climate change and reaching net zero. We spent 6.2 million and we're projected to spend 15.4, so that's quite a shortfall. I'd just like some information on how we will deal with that slippage and what has caused it. And similarly, on page 43, on the energy efficiency figures, we had 9.6 million in the budget and we're projected to spend 1.2. So again, there's a considerable shortfall in the spend on energy efficiency. So I could either get a written response, but it was just really to say I'd like to know why we're so far behind on expenditure.
Answer the question, Mr. Emmett, please.
Thank you, Convener. So in terms of the programme, we've tried to match the work that's going to be done in the year with what we're reporting. So you'll see we've actually had, in the overall scheme of the programme, There's relatively little slippage in this little year, but the programme looks over a 5-year period. So in terms of the themes and around climate change, so I'm happy to circulate to members of the committee details of the projects that make up the climate change work and where we are with those projects. Nothing's taken out of the scheme, and obviously there will be a report coming back shortly on the next 5-year plan, which will enable you to look at the work that's being done over that. And I'm happy as part of that to include the energy efficiency work, so everyone has got an update on the work that's been done when it's programmed to be completed. Convener.
Thanks for the answer, and that's answer the question. Yeah, Councillor Rome, please.
Thank you, Convener. Just wanted to firstly thank officers for all the work they've done on both the capital plan and revenue to date. It's obviously a very difficult environment we're in with high inflation and an ever-changing picture, so it's difficult to get the figures to balance, and I know everyone puts in a lot of work towards that. I just want to ask about the risk register in the capital plan, specifically items 3 and 4 in the risk register. The other items 1, 2 and 5 have all seen the residual risk drop because of measures and controls that are put in place. I just want assurance on the estimated completion dates for projects and capital receipts for sales of assets not achieved, because, as I say, the residual risk hasn't dropped. So I just want assurances they'll be kept under review for the next time that we look at this report.
Thank you. Mr. Emmett, please.
So thank you, Convener. So we keep the delivery of the programme under careful monitoring, but there continue to be external influences which affect when things will be delivered. So some programmes, like the new campus that you referred to earlier, are on track, and when the programme's in place, programmes that require external parties intervention or external funding can be subject to delay because of that. So it remains a risk that there will be delays to project for a variety of reasons. In relation to receipts, the ability to sell assets which are no longer needed, and the timing of those receipts is very much dependent on unique circumstances, where there's a demand for any particular type of land, how long it takes the sale to go through and the due diligence to be completed. So there is always, we will have an assumption in the programme about how much income that we will get, but whether we achieve that in any one year isn't entirely at our hand. So that's why that's still flagged up as a risk, Councillor.
Thank you very much. Answer your question.
That's very helpful. Thank you, Robert.
Thank you. I see no further questions or comments, so we'll take that report as agreed. Thank you.
That takes you on to item 5, revenue monitoring. There has to be the recommendations.
On to any questions or comments? Councillor McHugh, please.
Thank you. My question relates to the Housing Revenue Account Renewal and Repair Fund, detailed on page 58 of our bundle. It's not detailed in the report, but this reserve fund stood at 11.3 million on the 31st of March 2023. Today's report projects a total reserve of 1.7 million at March 2025. Would officers care to comment on the reduction of £10 million in the reserve balance over the last 3 years and the implications, particularly the implications that might have on housing services should the account run into deficit during 25-26?
Thanks for the question. Now over to you, Paul. I think that's this one. Thank you.
Thank you for the question, Councillor McHugh. I can confirm in terms of the movements in the balance since 2023, the detail that made up these movements has previously been reported to committee within the accounts, but I'm certainly happy to take that away and come back with more detail. In addition to that, you'll be aware that a report came to committee earlier in the year recommending use of £2.6 million worth of the benefit, worth of the reserves to contribute towards the recovery plan that's detailed in the report. In terms of the implications for future years, you'll be aware in the report that there's a recommendation for officers there to continue to look at all areas of discretionary spend to ensure that the budget is delivered within a balanced fashion and to minimise the use of the reserves. But happy to come back and give you that bit of further detail in terms of the movements since the 1st of April 23 that you mentioned.
Ms. Paul, does that answer your question?
Thank you. Yes, thank you.
Thank you. Bailey Keenan, please.
I wonder if officers were able to give a breakdown of what the £2 million worth of overspend within education is in relation to the sickness absence and the 50% reduction in NQTs. Can I also ask if someone's able to provide, and I've asked it a few times at council, if someone's able to provide some detail of the level of individual employees that are off long-term sick, that are being held up because they're not getting an appointment with hospital or they're not meeting a consultant. So the health service is starting to let our service down while it's backlogging. And I know for a previous workplace, and having read sick notes or fit notes for people, that it clearly says on a fit note for someone that if they're waiting on a consultant or they've not got another, if the operation doesn't happen, they're not likely to get better anytime soon. So what's the picture over council for that? And when am I going to get an answer to it?
Thanks for your questions. I'm not so sure we can answer NHS questions, but I'll bring in Robert in the first instance to take over the first part of the question.
So thank you, convener, and thank you, Billy Keenan. We can provide you with details of how the overspend is made up in terms of the cost, but we know that teacher sickness has gone up by about 25% over the last year, and because of our reductions in newly qualified teachers that we've been allocated, that's adding to the additional cost. But I'm happy to circulate to the committee the details of the breakdown in relation to that. In relation to long-term sickness, we will only know whether someone is being delayed if they've provided specific information to us. Again, I'm happy to come back to the committee with what we have got, but if someone doesn't provide us with information as to the reason why they're continuing to be off sick, then we won't have necessarily have a record of it. But we'll see whether that's something we can pick up with colleagues and circulate again for the committee to give as much information as we can.
Thank you. Sorry, thank you for the response, Mr. Emmett. Can maybe bring in the Chief Executive with any comments?
Yeah, thanks, Councillor Flynn. I think just to add to what Robert has outlined, we currently have an absence management system. We report the absence through the service monitoring plans, but we don't actually record the area of absence that Bailey Keenan has referenced. What we can do is pick that up verbally with individuals when we're meeting them as part of the absence policy, but there isn't a central record held for those people that are off waiting an appointment. What managers are doing is managing that absence. So we can look to see if there's anything we can share via email to elected members, but we do not record that data when managing absences.
Bill Keenan.
Well, can I ask that we start to take some account of that, given that it may well be causing us considerable levels of absence? I've seen fit notes from people that have said if they didn't meet that, see a consultant, or they didn't get the operation, they're not likely to be back to work anytime soon. Effectively, that's the health service holding return to work up, and we should be taking that into account when we're dealing as partners of the health service.
Just like the Chief Executive come back in.
Thanks, Councillor Flynn. Bailey Keenan, the Council employs an occupational health service which provides a variety of services such as counselling, physio, etc. for our employees. So where we can provide that service through occupational health to hopefully accelerate and promote a return to work, we do that. At this point, I cannot give you any assurance or confirmation that we can collect that data. That's something I'd need to go back and speak to the relevant IT/people services teams. But please be assured that where we can use our own occupational health service, we are doing that to facilitate the employee and hopefully speed up their return to work so they can get back to resuming their work within the council.
Thanks very much for that. I don't see any further questions or comments. We'll take that report as agreed. Thank you.
Thank you. That takes you on to item 6, Community Justice Annual Activity Report. We'll ask you the recommendations.
See any questions or comments on this report? Just wait a second. Don't see any, so we'll just take that report as agreed as well. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you, Convener. That takes you on to the remaining item. Item 7, Housing Revenue Budget and Review of Rents and Other Housing Charges. We'd ask you the proposals.
Again, I'll put up for questions or comments. Councillor McHugh, please.
Thank you. The Housing Scotland Act of 2001 charges local authorities with a responsibility to consult tenants on any proposed increase in rent or other service charges and the likely effect on the tenant, and regard must be given to the representations made. This report on review of rents and other charges describes the consultation process at Appendix 4, page 117 of our bundle. But once again, there is no evidence of any feedback from tenants, other than a paragraph from the DFTA, Dundee Federation of Tenants Associations, that appears to support the top rate of increase, 5%, an option supported by only 17.4% of tenants who completed the consultation. I have to ask then, who does the DFTA represent, since their response to the consultation doesn't reflect the majority view of tenants? Where is the tenants' voice that we, as elected members, are here to represent? This led me to look at the Council's tenant participation strategy. This colourful document talks about tenants influencing decisions on housing services. But the devil, as always, is in the detail. The strategy was published in 2016. The accompanying action plan lists actions to be completed between December 2016 and 2020. Tonight, we are considering rent increases for 25-26. Rents have increased 14% since 2021. Sheltered charges have increased 19.8%. The impact assessment attached to tonight's report lists 29 out of 61 impacts as not known. Hardly surprising, considering that of the 6 registered tenants' organisations on the Council's website, none are currently registered. And I'm told 3 of the 6 no longer exist. How then can we, as elected members, give regard to representations made, as we are charged to in the legislation? Can officers give assurance that the tenant participation process will be reviewed and updated in all its aspects, including around funding to support tenants to influence decisions on housing services, and that a report will come to committee once this review is completed? Can I just add one further comment? I did get a response from Mr. Boyle this afternoon to some of the questions I had asked, and further information about engagement with sheltered tenants. But it didn't address my questions in relation to what was the feedback from tenants, so my questions still stand.
Okay, thank you very much for your comments. With regards to the DFT, I think you need to ask them and let them explain who they represent if they don't actually equate to the most. And we see 63% of those polled or those responded from the 2073 looking for option 1 to be accepted. So I think the DFT must need to explain that question. And with regards to the rest of them, I'll bring in Tony in the first instance.
Thanks, Convener, and thanks, Councillor McHugh. In terms of the registered tenants organisations and DFT representation, the DFT represents 2 RTOs, Lockheed Residents and Tenants Association and St Mary's Association of Residents and Tenants. However, in addition to this, the DFTA has a number of independent representatives, including those who sit on non-RTO residents groups who take up matters on behalf of DCC tenants. We are currently in the process of reviewing the housing landing pages on the website to ensure that these are up to date and will reflect this within. And furthermore, on the substantive point that Councillor Mew raises, I'm happy to confirm that we will be reviewing the tenant participation strategy in the coming months, and it would be my intention to bring this back to committee at some point over the next year.
Thank you very much.
Thank you, I'm happy with that.
So much, and I actually attended one of the consultations myself at one of the shelter complexes, and I have to say the participation between the actual officers and the people that turned up, because some of them went from that particular complex, was actually very, very positive. So I think that's really quite welcome as well. I think the committee is asked to agree the recommendations. I see no other questions or comments, so we'll take that as agreed. Thank you very much, and that's the business for this evening. Thank you. Good night.
Good night.